Hi folks, Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the Islamic societies of Afghanistan and Iraq are now more devout and more pious along Islamic lines than they were when the West turned up. Now, when Iraq was invaded, one of the very first things that the liberating Americans did was set up a gay lesbian counselling service in downtown Baghdad. Did they worry about getting the electricity running again, or the water, or law and order, or anything like that? No. We've got to put in gay lesbian counselling services, and we've got to set up a gender studies class in the fucking university. That's what we have to do. Now, they did pretty much the same thing in Afghanistan. Instead of going in there and building wells and roads, because it's very third world, roads and bridges and infrastructure, instead of really doing something that all could be valuable to all the people in terms of infrastructure and the like, either getting it working again or putting in new and important infrastructure. Some of the rural villages where they've got to walk 2 or 3 miles to get to the nearest water well, things like that they could have addressed those, but no. We've got to put in a gender studies class and convince all girls that they should be lesbians, that sort of thing. Now, you may sort of say, well, why would anybody do that? I mean, why not do things that are of universal value, such as the roads and the bridges? Well, no, that's simply because they were trying to enforce an ideology, which of course is the globalist project, to enforce ideology before anything else. And this ideology is to permit societies, or to fracture and demoralize society so they can be more easy to control. And that's, again, very much the globalist project. It's working quite well in the West, and they've even taken over all the Western governments. Our own supposedly elected representatives are now working hard for the globalists to undermine the very culture they're supposed to be representing and protecting. I mean, don't you love the irony of that? But coming back to these Afghanistan and Iraq, the thing about the gay, lesbian, the LGBTQ, the gender studies, all that, isn't that the globalists care about that. They don't give a flying fuck about the LGBTQ or the trans or the lesbian. They don't care about any of that. What it is a perfectly useful device for undermining and dividing society and demoralizing society, fracturing society. It's it is the weapon of choice that the globalists will reach for. And very much, by the way, something that the Jewish socialist activists were using in 1920s Germany, for example. So, that Weimar Germany sort of thing. So it's something that's widely used and believed to be, it's the real go-to. How can I undermine and demoralize and fracture the society? Well, this is how you do it. Gay, lesbian, trans, feminist, this is how you do it. And so when the West went into Afghanistan and Iraq, they couldn't wait. In fact, they almost fell over themselves, tripped over themselves in the headlong ideological rush to it's just the minute the American troops enter fucking Baghdad, some ideological bunch of goons is there opening up a gay lesbian counselling service. I mean, fuck. and this is they tried in Afghanistan as well. Now, even 20 plus years of American presence in Iraq and influence, and the society already fractured along religious lines and other things like that, tribal lines, Kurds and the Sunnis and so all on the Shias, all this sort of thing. So already well fractured, and they throw this stuff in as well. Afghanistan, sort of quite tribal, and not so much the Sunni and the Shia sort of divide, but nonetheless, there's and so when the Americans were like occupiers there, or the Western countries were occupiers there, and heavy-handed pushing of Western leftist gay, lesbian, gender studies, feminism, the whole shebang in there, and really pushing it hard, like only giving grants for businesses to women, and things like that, really pushing that hard. And so you'd think after 20 years, particularly given what a young society they are, people don't have as long as life expectancy there, and because it's such a young society where the average age is in the 20s, you think that most of the people there, the only thing they know, as in the majority, the only thing they know is Western values. Girls going to school, gender studies classes, gay, lesbian, this and so. So that's all they know. So you'd think that at the very least that it would be maybe not 100% successful transplant of Western, how to destroy society, Western values, maybe not 100% successful transplant, but you think it would generally, have got some traction and occupy some sort of places in those societies, but not so. Quite understandably, these Western values have been rejected out of hand, and if anything, Afghanistan's gone back to be, exactly what it was before the Americans turned up. And there's even with, dire threats of we won't give you any money and we won't give you any international aid, United Nations threatening and all this sort of stuff. In spite of all that, they've still gone back to pretty much as it was in the beginning. Now, if there is a slight shift, it's cosmetic in the sense of, well, why don't we have a woman doing such and such, and then that might shut the Americans up or get the United Nations off our back, or we'll minimally concede to have a school for lesbians, provided the United Nations gives us vast sums of money that we can then do what we want with. Those sort of, so there's a bit of real politic there, but essentially society's gone back to how it was. Gay people, or people even suspected of it, are being beaten. Women who have not worn the prescribed dress are being beaten or even killed, for that matter. Men who are stealing things, having their hands cut off, and the list goes on of going back to core Islamic law. Now, whereas the Western media focuses on the gay, lesbian, the feminist, and that's those sort of issues. Men are treated very badly as well. Again, arbitrary arrest and arbitrary beatings, arbitrarily having their hand cut off and the like. So whereas the Western media concentrates just on one side of it, there are many other issues also. Gay people be thrown off the top of buildings and that sort of stuff. Now, in Iraq, there's been a lot of cases where mobs have gathered, and even the moral police have arrested women for not dressing modestly. Now, in places in Iraq, there's not the full burqa thing. So you'd say they're generally maybe a bit more moderate take on Islam and the codes of behavior, which was already the case anyway in Iraq, with Saddam Hussein. So now, but there was a recent thing I saw where mobs of young men were following a woman who was wearing a tight top and tight Western jeans, looking very much like a sort of a Western teenager, I guess. And a mob of men was accusing her of acting immodestly and dressing immodestly and so on. And this is an increasing trend as far as I can see in Iraq. So if anything, they're becoming more, or they're heading more towards the Islamic code of conduct and behavior. And, again, Islam is different from, say, Christianity, since the Christianity is something you do outside of your work. Not that you won't hold Christian beliefs, of charity and those sort of things, but Islam in the sense, particularly the tribal and more simple-minded, people where a lot of people are procreating with their cousins. Islam's become a code of life. It's how you live your life. It's quite detailed, really, I guess, compared to some other religions, but and with quite stringent rules of adherence and those sorts of things. So if anything, I in my view at least, Iraq's become more Islamic and more towards the fundamentalist view than it may be to a soft sort of combo of Western values and Islam that one could say Iraq had at one stage. So really what we're seeing is the complete non-success of Western values are being completely rejected by the vast majority of the population, and that rejection seems to be growing in intensity in places that had flirted with Western values. Now, some of this is because instead of introducing Western values of things like rule of law, due legal process, democratic elections, impartial public service, independent judiciary, instead of using those building blocks, contract law, instead of using those building blocks to change society, instead they've gone headlong into gay, lesbian, LGBT, trans, feminism. They've gone full bore with the ideology, hard leftist undermine society ideology. Now, because they've so successfully infiltrated Christian societies with this nonsense of to demoralize societies, they assumed quite wrongly, and I think the people that were leading the charge must have been fucking stupid, because I don't think it was ever going to play out in the same way. Because they wanted to undermine those societies, they went headlong with the feminists, the LGBTQ and the trans and everything, to only find that it was strongly and heavily rejected, and if anything has created more fundamentalism than less. And so it's been a rousing non-success. And I think when we look at Uganda as another example here, Uganda recently brought out what in my view were quite harsh laws against gay, lesbian relations and so on. But if you actually look further at the legislation they've passed, it's more about promoting gay lesbianism and using gay lesbian as a stalking horse of a human rights issue, as a cat's paw. So this is how the globalists have been very successful undermining vast areas of Western society, the universities and the young kids in particular, the young simple activist class type of people. They've been very successful in pushing out until the black lesbian has is fully included in society in every way. Until we've achieved that, then there is no equality. There is no equity. That has to be the defining thing. So because of that, they've been able to use that very successfully to undermine Western society at many levels and demoralize many people, that Western society is not only bad and evil, but not even worth fighting for. Now, this is something that the Ugandans, certainly in the way I read the legislation, they seem to have understood that the gay lesbian activism is a device to undermine their society. And they want to stop that undermining. And to do that, they had to introduce, as they would see it, comprehensive laws, not only to outlaw the intimate act itself, but to outlaw the activism and the way it's used to undermine their society and other societies by the globalists. And this was something they wanted to stop. And I think that assuming they enforce that legislation, will do it quite successfully. So I think this is something that other societies outside of the West are pushing back against, and with good reason. And hopefully they'll be successful at it, because it's just an outrage the way these globalists, who care nothing about the gay lesbian diaspora, care nothing about them, sneering of them, the way they use this merely as a device, a weapon to undermine Western society. That's all it is to them. And I'm glad to see some places are pushing back against it. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.